Hi again. We're reading from Jack Stewart's book called Lands Where My Fathers Died, a saga of the Stewart family and all of its interesting characters. You should be happy you were not a Royal Stewart 600 years ago. They seem to be dealt a lot of really bad luck. For example, dying when one of your own cannons explodes, being stabbed to death, being assassinated by your own uncle. And even though he didn't die, one Stewart was captured by pirates and remained a prisoner for a long time. Chapter 2. Royal Stewarts, 1371 to 1714.
Rock-a-bye baby on the treetop. When the wind blows, the cradle will rock. When the bough breaks, the cradle will fall, and down will come baby, cradle and all. These lyrics from the old children's lullaby Rock-a-bye Baby by John Newbery refer to events during the reign of King James VII, King of Scotland. The baby is supposed to be the son of James VII and II, who was widely believed to be someone else's child, smuggled into the birthing room in order to provide a Roman Catholic heir for James. The wind may be that Protestant wind or force blowing or coming from the Netherlands, bringing James's nephew and son-in-law William of Orange, who would eventually depose King James II in the Revolution. The cradle is the royal house of Stuart. Robert, the baby that was born in Paisley, Renfrewshire in 1316, was destined to be a king, just as his mother predicted when she was dying. He used Stewart as his surname, and so became the first monarch of the royal house of Stuart. This started a long line of Stuart kings. During the previous 200 years, while this family held office as high stewards, they continually increased their power and influence in the affairs of Scotland. They gained fame as fighters and were rewarded for their successes on the battlefield. However, when they gained the throne, all that changed. It was not healthy to be a Stuart monarch. Of the 14 Stuarts, 4 were murdered, 2 died in battle, and 2 died of despair and grief. The story of the Royal Stewarts ended in a decisive battle at the Scottish town of Culloden in 1746 with the defeat of Bonnie Prince Charlie. No legitimate male heir of the royal house of Stuart survives today. In fact, the Stuart family today can be divided into these 2 categories. First, the legitimate but non-royal, or those who came off the main stem before the Stuarts became kings. Or second, the royal but illegitimate descendants of the Stuart kings. If you are a Stuart hearing this now, you are not a descendant of the royal house of Stuart. The last of the Royal Stewarts died out in 1807. What follows is a brief history of the Royal Stewarts, who remained on the throne of Scotland for 343 years, from 1371 through 1714. Like any family, this one has good guys and bad guys, good women and bad women, and lots of family stories. Some of the Stuarts had nicknames that were very descriptive. The one thing they had the most of, though, it seems, is really bad luck. Robert II, King of Scotland, reigned from 1371 to 1390. Robert Stewart, born in 1316, was the grandson of Robert the Bruce, King of Scotland. Robert Stewart survived against incredible odds when a devastating epidemic raced through Europe, the Black Death, which peaked between 1348 and 1350 and is estimated to have killed 30 to 60% of Europe's population. Both Robert Stewart and his son John survived the plague, a tribute to the hardy stock these Stewarts came from, especially noteworthy since nearly 100 million people died from the Black Death. During this period, the Stewarts were not yet in power as kings of Scotland. Robert the Bruce had taken over as King Robert I of Scotland in 1306. He was called the Bruce because his family had come from Brice in France, where his French name was Robert de Bruce. In Scotland, that translated in the way the head of a family is known, and he was called the Bruce. The same as the chief of the MacGregors, for instance, was referred to as the MacGregors. Robert the Bruce had only one male heir, so when he died of leprosy in 1329, the title of king went to his only surviving son, King David II. It was not until David II died in 1371 that Robert the Bruce's grandson, Robert Stewart, at the age of 55, became king. By then he was an old man by medieval standards. Robert was Marjorie Stuart's baby, born by cesarean operation, during which his eye was cut. When he became the first Stuart king of Scots, he had weak eyes from that cut and was dubbed King Bleary by his subjects. Robert married twice and produced nearly 21 children. His first wife's 4 children were born outside the marriage. He had 2 sons by his second wife, and in addition had 6 illegitimate sons. He was elderly and infirm when he passed the title of king to his eldest son. He died in 1390. Robert III, King of Scotland, reigned from 1390 to 1406. King Robert II's eldest son, John, succeeded him as King Robert III in 1390. The son of his father and his first wife was born illegitimate in 1337, was made legitimate in 1347, and given the baptismal name of John. But he took the name of Robert when he was made king at age 53. The Scots had sore memories of their last king named John Balloy, who was badly defeated and humiliated by the English in 1296. So this John was convinced to use the name Robert. His younger brother dominated him. He had been disabled in 1388 by a horse's kick and was regarded as unfit to govern. When he tried to rule for himself, he oppressed the weak, and the whole kingdom was the den of thieves, according to one account. The Scottish Parliament condemned him, and they appointed his son David to govern for him. Even that didn't work, and David died in mysterious circumstances in 1402. Robert then sent his 11-year-old son James to France for safety, but that boy was captured by the pirates. Robert III died shortly after that in 1406. He wrote his own epitaph, "Bury me in Midden," that's a dunghill, "and write, here lies the worst of kings and the most wretched of men." He's buried in Paisley Abbey because he is unworthy, he said, to be buried at Scone, the traditional seat of power for previous Scottish royalty. James I, King of Scotland, reigned from 1406 to 1437. Robert's son James was born in 1394. When he was 12 years old, he was captured by the English fleet and remained a prisoner of the English in the Tower of London until 1424. When his father Robert III died in 1406, he was declared the king, but was still a prisoner, unable to come to Scotland to reign. One day in 1423 he saw a beautiful young woman strolling in the gardens beneath his cell, and fell in love with her. She was Lady Joan Beaufort, a close relative of the English king. They were married the next year, and he was allowed to return to his home to be crowned. James I inherited a Scotland that was in disorder in 1424. He was determined to restore law and order to his realm, but his rivals resented him. At midnight on February the 20th, 1437, he was assassinated and his queen badly injured by his own uncle and a group of conspirators. James II, King of Scotland, reigned from 1437 to 1460. Born in 1430 and the surviving member of twins, 6-year-old son James became King James II in 1437. He was known as James the Fiery Face because of a birthmark covering the left side of his face. It was a time when the use of artillery was becoming a crucial new force in warfare. This new technology served James well until 1460, when he stood next to one of his cannons and it exploded, killing him instantly. He was 29 years old. James III, King of Scotland, reigned from 1460 to 1488. James II had one son, also named James, born in 1451. James was 9 when he inherited his father's throne in 1460. Contemporaries and historians alike have criticized him of being weak and grasping. He was overly friendly with England. He was blamed for everything that went wrong: lawlessness, debased, money, plague, famine, and high prices. In 1488, Scottish nobles seized his eldest son and defeated James at the Battle of Sawseyburn. He was thrown from his horse as he fled from the field. Carried into a nearby cottage, he called for a priest, whereupon a mysterious figure forced his way in, exclaimed, "I will shrive thee, give you your penance," and stabbed him to death. He was 37 years old. James IV, King of Scotland, reigned from 1488 to 1513. James IV, born in 1473, was 15 years old when his father's enemies forced him to ride with them to the Battle of Sawseyburn, where his father was killed. For the rest of his life, he wore an iron chain around his waist as a penance. That is why he was known as James of the Iron Belt. In spite of being a young king, he had an astonishing knowledge of everything, plus an extroverted, high-spirited, open-handed, and fun-loving disposition. In addition to English, he spoke Latin, French, German, Flemish, Italian, Spanish, and some Gaelic. He took an active interest in literature, science, and the law, even trying his hand at dentistry and minor surgery. When he was 30 years old, he accepted the offer of King Henry VII of England to take his daughter, Princess Margaret Tudor, as his bride. This alliance, joining the royal families of Scotland and England, became known as the marriage of the thistle and the rose. It was not long before Henry VIII came along as the new King of England, and when he invaded France in 1513, James felt that he must assist Scotland's old ally, France. He led his army against the English at the Battle of Flodden Field in the northern part of England near the Scottish border. James and many of his Scots nobles were massacred on the battlefield that day.
It certainly wasn't healthy to be a Stuart monarch. We will continue the story next week, when we'll hear about the next generation of Royal Stewarts who would reign from 1513 to 1685. Please join us.